I'm not proud to admit this, but there was a time in my life when I was 28 where things had hit such a low point that I found myself lurking through the men seeking women and one-night stand sections on Craigslist. Yeah, that's how bad it got. As you'd expect, most of the posts were either painfully fake or featured pictures of women that, well, let's just say, weren't exactly appealing. Most of them looked disheveled, overweight, or just off. But there was one listing that stood out from the mess, one that felt eerily real. The photo attached was of a brunette, nothing extravagant or model tier, just a normal, kind of cute woman. She looked believable. That's what made it stick. The ad simply read, "Female, 26, looking for a quick hookup. No feelings, no relationship. Just a one-night stand." At the bottom of the post, she left her number. With hesitation and a weird mix of nerves, I texted her. The moment I hit send, my iMessage bubble turned blue, meaning she had an iPhone. That shouldn't have meant anything, but somehow it made her seem more real. A few seconds later, the familiar gray typing bubble popped up. "Hi, I'm Jen, but you can call me Jenny," she replied. That was it. We started texting back and forth, nothing too serious, mostly light flirting, playful remarks. I tried to keep it cool, but something about how quick and natural the conversation flowed made it feel like I'd stumbled into something rare. After just a little back and forth, she sent her address. I hesitated. My hand was already reaching for my car keys, but I stood there for a moment, stuck between excitement and shame. Was I really about to do this? Apparently, yes. Minutes later, I found myself pulling into a dimly lit, dead-end street in a part of town that was less than inviting. Cracked sidewalks, broken streetlights, houses pressed close together like they were hiding something. I started having second thoughts. My phone buzzed. I had asked her which house was hers. 209. The last house by the dead end. That's what she wrote. I crept forward in my car until I reached the final house on the block. A small porch light flickered weakly, casting shadows across the overgrown lawn. And there it was, 209, barely visible, stamped onto the cracked siding near the door. I won't sugarcoat it. The place looked rough. It was a tiny single-story house with knee-high grass choking the yard and a general air of neglect clinging to it like a wet coat. One of those houses that just feels like no one's supposed to be there. And still, I sat in the driver's seat, staring at that porch light, trying to convince myself to get out. I couldn't believe I was really doing this. With a shaky breath, I stepped out of my car and walked up to the front door of that run-down little house. My knuckles rapped against the wood, once, twice, then silence. No footsteps, no voice, no Jenny. Then my phone buzzed. "Jenny, come around back." I stared at the screen. My thumbs hesitated over the keyboard as I replied, "Why?" The familiar gray bubble popped up. She was typing. But then, it disappeared. Nothing came through. I waited. Seconds ticked by. Still nothing. There was a tight, sinking feeling in my stomach. A rational voice in my head whispered, "This is stupid. Turn around. Leave now." But I didn't. I was a desperate, lonely man with no real excuses left. So, ignoring every red flag and ounce of instinct, I made my way toward the side of the house. A rickety wooden gate sat crookedly in its frame. I lifted the latch, and it creaked open with a dry groan that echoed into the darkness. I stepped into the backyard, cautiously, each footfall crunching against the gravel. The night was still, the kind of quiet that feels like it's watching you. Then I looked up. My eyes locked onto a second-story window. There was someone staring down at me, still, silent, a figure framed in shadow. The moment our eyes met, they turned away, and the blinds snapped shut in one swift motion. My chest tightened. That had to be Jenny, I told myself. I wanted to believe that. Another buzz from my phone. Jenny, I'll be right out, just brushing up. I was trembling now. I didn't know if it was nerves about hooking up with a stranger or something deeper, something darker. I tried to calm my breathing, but my ears were alert, scanning the silence. And then I heard it. A sharp crack, like a twig snapping underfoot. It came from deeper in the yard, near the back. I froze. My grip tightened on my phone, and I instinctively flipped on the flashlight. A narrow beam of light cut through the night, and I slowly turned, aiming it toward the sound. The beam landed on the shed, an old wooden structure tucked into the corner of the backyard, half swallowed by shadows. And just as I swept the light across its side, I saw something. Movement. A shape. An arm. It slipped behind the shed with unnatural swiftness. Just an arm vanishing into the dark like it had been waiting there. My blood ran cold. My legs locked in place. For a second, it felt like my heart just stopped altogether. I killed the flashlight. My fingers fumbled over the button, and darkness swallowed the backyard once again. Somehow, don't ask me how, I managed to backtrack without making a sound. Step by step, I crept away from the shed, through the overgrown weeds and past the splintered fence, until I reached the gate. I slipped through it, pulled it shut, and made a beeline to my car. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the door handle. I climbed in, half panicked, and just as I was pulling the door closed, slam! A window somewhere in the house flew open like it had been kicked from the inside. Then came the voice. Shrill, cracked, completely unhinged. A woman screamed, "Wait! Don't go!" I couldn't see her, but the way she shouted, it wasn't just desperate, it was deranged. Panic surged through me. I didn't hesitate. I turned the key and stomped on the gas, tearing away from the curb like my life depended on it, because in that moment, I was convinced it did. As I sped off, I caught one last glimpse of the house through my rearview mirror. The front door had flung open. And then, pop! A sharp, loud bang cracked through the night. Something struck my car. My instincts took over. I floored it. The engine roared, and I shot down the street, weaving past dark houses and flickering lampposts. But just a few blocks later, the car began to lurch. I could feel it, the wobble, the resistance, the harsh thudding sound of rubber tearing apart. I pulled to the side of the road and got out, heart still hammering in my chest. Flat tire. The bastards had shot my damn tire. I didn't wait around to think. I limped the car along on the rim as far as I could, just far enough to feel like I'd left that neighborhood behind. And then, finally, I called roadside service. The repair guy showed up maybe 20 minutes later. Older guy, friendly but cautious. He knelt down next to the tire, inspecting it while I stood there watching, still catching my breath. And then he looked up at me, holding something between his fingers. A bullet. He'd found a bullet still lodged in the flat. His eyes met mine. "You weren't lying," he muttered, voice low. He offered to stick around when I called the cops to vouch for what happened. Turned out, it didn't take long for law enforcement to connect the dots. Within a day, 3 people were arrested from that house. One was a filthy-looking woman, mud-caked clothes, hollow eyes. The other 2? Redneck-type men, rough and mean-looking, like they'd crawled out of a swamp. They stood trial eventually. I don't even remember the full list of charges. God knows what they were actually found guilty of. But you know what stuck with me the most? They didn't even leave. They just stayed in that house after all that. Like they never thought they'd get caught. Or maybe, just maybe, they wanted someone else to come knocking next. My mother and stepdad are ranchers, practical, grounded people, especially my mom. A while back, they got themselves a new work truck. The old one, still running fine, was no longer needed, so they decided to put it up for sale. It didn't take long before a woman from a small rural town, about 4 hours away, reached out, sounding very interested. But from the start, something felt off. The woman kept offering excuses for why she couldn't meet halfway to look at or pick up the truck. There were always issues. No ride, bad timing, weather, money, you name it. Now my stepdad, he's a good man, but nice to a fault. He doesn't like letting people down, especially strangers. So, despite the red flags waving in the wind, he convinced my mom to make the trip that Saturday. She'd follow in a second vehicle so he could drive the truck there himself. My mom, though, she's no fool. She was suspicious the moment the idea was mentioned. This whole thing already stunk. And when we finally arrived at the woman's property, her gut told her she was right. The woman spun a ridiculous, tangled story about her bank having issues. Something about processing delays and mistakes that weren't her fault. She handed over a post-dated check, and then, to top it off, she actually begged my stepdad to keep the license plates in his name. That was it. My mom excused herself, pulled my stepdad aside, and the two of them had a heated, whispered argument just out of earshot. She wasn't having it. There was no way she was walking away from that deal with plates still in their name, or a worthless piece of paper for payment. In the end, she won the battle over the plates. They canceled those on the spot. But the check? That was another story. My stepdad, ever the hopeful optimist, agreed to take it. So we drove another 4 hours home, the truck now officially out of our hands. And of course, just as anyone other than my stepdad could have predicted, when the date on the check rolled around, it bounced. Completely useless. The woman dodged phone calls for a while, disappearing into silence. Then one day she finally answered, casually spinning another convoluted excuse. Something about being in the hospital. She sounded airy, distracted, like it was no big deal, like she hadn't just ripped someone off. But this time, something in my stepdad snapped. He finally stood his ground. He told her, flat out, that they were coming back for the truck, no discussion. So once again, they loaded up and made the 4-hour drive, this time bringing a flatbed trailer, just in case she had stripped the truck for parts or sabotaged it somehow. When they arrived, no one answered the door. Not a sound from the house. They searched the property until they found the truck parked inside a shed, hidden away like it had been stashed there deliberately. They loaded it up, my stepdad working quickly, checking the tires, securing the winch, making sure everything was in place. Meanwhile, my mom, quiet, seething, couldn't help herself. While he was still strapping down the load, she walked back up to the house, scribbled a quick note, something along the lines of, "Thanks for nothing. Hope you enjoyed screwing us around." And then she slipped it right under the door. 15 minutes into the drive home, just as the quiet started to settle in, my mom's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was her. The same woman who, just 2 days ago, claimed to be lying in a hospital bed. My mom answered, cautious but composed. The voice on the other end, though, it wasn't frantic. It wasn't regretful. It was cold. She said, with absolute calm, "I know exactly where you live. You made a huge mistake." No yelling, no threats, just flat, quiet certainty. The line went dead. Neither of them said much after that. My stepdad clenched the steering wheel harder, and my mom just stared straight ahead. The miles rolled by in silence, but the air inside that cab had turned heavy. Something felt wrong. 2 days later, early morning, just before sunrise, everything snapped. My stepdad jolted awake to the unmistakable sound of the bedroom window sliding open. Before he could react, someone was already halfway inside. Down the hall, from my room, I heard it, my mother's scream. I'll never forget that sound for as long as I live. It cut through the air like a siren, raw and full of terror. It wasn't confusion or fear. It was panic, pure, unfiltered panic. I ran to the doorway, frozen in place. I didn't even need to see her face. I already knew. It was her. That crazed woman had come all the way to our house, and she was armed, a knife in her hand. She wasn't there to talk. She wasn't there to argue. She was there to hurt someone. How my stepdad managed to take her down, I still don't understand. But somehow, even unarmed, half asleep and caught off guard, he fought her off, took control, pinned her down until help arrived. The police came quickly. My mom gave her statement, and so did I. They arrested the woman on the spot. She didn't say a word as they took her away. No apology, no explanation, just that same twisted silence. The whole thing still doesn't feel real sometimes, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that karma moves fast when it wants to, and sometimes it carries a badge. This story took place a long time ago, back in 2002, when Craigslist was still in its early days. Most people today probably wouldn't recognize what it was like back then. Craigslist wasn't the sketchy mess it's sometimes known for now. At the time, it felt more like an online garage sale, just a big virtual community board where people listed things they didn't need anymore, stuff that still had some use or value. I'll never forget it. That same year, I managed to snag a basketball hoop, a hockey net, and even a spoiler for my car, all completely free and all in perfect condition. You'd be lucky to find anything like that these days. Anyway, my son and I had been dying to get our hands on a decent hockey net. We used to practice out in the cul-de-sac near our house every evening when the weather was nice. Just for clarity, this all happened before I got that free one I mentioned earlier. One night while scrolling through Craigslist, I stumbled across an ad that seemed almost too good to be true. A slightly used, regulation-size hockey goal. Only $50. The listing also mentioned it came with a puck and 2 slightly used hockey sticks. I still have a picture of that ad saved somewhere. It looked legit. Like I said, it seemed perfect. Only catch? The guy selling it lived 2 hours away. Still, I figured it was worth reaching out, so I called the number he listed. He picked up almost immediately. His voice was deep, low and steady. It had this dark, flat tone to it, quiet, emotionless, but nothing immediately off-putting. No red flags, just calm. We chatted for a bit. He sounded normal enough, even if a little withdrawn. He agreed to meet halfway, since the drive was long for both of us, said he'd toss the gear in the back of his pickup and meet me at a rest stop off the highway. There was one catch, though. He worked late. Said he wouldn't be able to get there until after his shift ended, which meant we'd be meeting well after dark. I hesitated for a second, but the deal seemed too good to pass up. So I said, sure. We picked a rest stop along a stretch of highway that wasn't too far from either of us, neutral ground, the kind of place with a few dimly lit vending machines, a bathroom that always smelled like bleach, and just enough parking spots to feel quiet, but not abandoned. It didn't seem like anything could go wrong. Back then, I didn't know how wrong I could be. My son was just 11 years old at the time. We took my wife's minivan. It was the only vehicle big enough to haul something like a regulation-size hockey net. About an hour later, we arrived at the designated rest stop. It was late. The place was deserted. Not a single other vehicle in sight. But it wasn't pitch black. 3 tall light posts kept the lot decently illuminated, casting long, empty shadows across the pavement. I pulled into a space directly beneath one of the lights, trying to keep things as visible and safe as possible. And then, right on time, a pickup truck pulled in off the highway. It rolled slowly toward us, headlights flaring through the quiet, and stopped just a few feet in front of our van. I got out and approached the driver's window. The first thing I noticed, my stomach twisted. The back of his truck was completely empty, not a single item in it. The man inside leaned slightly toward the window and asked in that same flat, low voice, "You, Steve?" "Yup, that's me," I replied. "All right, my buddy's bringing the stuff with his truck," he said, nodding behind me. He pulled forward and stopped again, this time directly behind my vehicle. He shifted into park. That's when the first real wave of dread hit me. Something didn't feel right at all. I turned quickly and told my son, my heart pounding, "Get back in the car, lock every door, except mine." He did what I said. I could see the confusion in his eyes, but he followed my instructions. The door clicked shut. And then, more headlights. 2 additional pickup trucks came off the highway and rolled slowly into the lot, pulling up on either side of me. I already knew. There was no hockey net in any of them. My mouth went dry. My hands trembled slightly. But my thoughts weren't on myself. I was terrified for my son sitting behind me in that van. The doors to the trucks opened. A group of men stepped out, big men, some thick and heavy-set, others muscular and lean, all of them towering and quiet. They circled slowly, eyeing me from head to toe like I was nothing more than prey. That kind of cold, deliberate intimidation that says they've done this before. Then one of them stepped forward. He was bald, wore sunglasses at night, and had a voice that rumbled like thunder. "Where's the money?" I didn't hesitate. My hands were already moving. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and handed it over without a word. "Please," I said, voice trembling, "just let me and my son go." He flipped through the cash, grunted, and pulled out around $100. His expression twisted in disgust, clearly expecting more. And then, without warning, he barked something to two of the other men. They turned toward the minivan. "No, please, please don't touch him," I screamed, panic breaking loose in my voice. I stepped forward, but one of them was already raising a crowbar. Crack! Glass shattered. The back door window of the van exploded inward. I'll never forget the sound that came next. My son's scream. Sharp, desperate, absolutely devastating. It rang in my ears like a bell, struck too hard, too fast. I've never felt so helpless. Never. And in that moment, all I could do was beg and pray they wouldn't take him. What happened next, I can only describe as a miracle. A literal answer to the panicked prayers I'd been whispering in my head. From the corner of my eye, I saw headlights approaching, another vehicle pulling in off the highway. All of the men, every last one of them, froze. They turned in unison to look at the incoming car. It rolled slowly into the lot, quiet, until I saw the unmistakable shape of the roof-mounted light bar. My heart just about dropped into my stomach, but this time from overwhelming relief. It was a police cruiser, and then the lights flashed. Red and blue strobes lit up the night like a beacon from heaven. The officer must have gotten close enough to see what was happening, because the moment those lights switched on, chaos erupted. All the men bolted. They scrambled back into their trucks like roaches under a flashlight. Engines roared to life. Tires squealed. Two of the pickup trucks tore out of the lot, speeding down the highway without looking back. But the third truck, the one in the back, didn't make it. The police car swerved after them, tires screeching, and cut off the final truck before it could get out. Seconds later, backup cruisers were already on the scene, sirens wailing as they boxed the vehicle in. I stood there, still trembling, still clutching my son, who hadn't stopped crying, but the sheer weight of what almost happened was crashing down on me all at once. We were alive. I explained everything, every single detail. The fake Craigslist post, the ambush, the attempted abduction. And to my shock, the men in custody didn't stay silent for long. Under pressure, they cracked fast. They gave up names, locations, and, thank God, the others. Apparently, loyalty wasn't part of their code. Whatever brotherhood they had, it crumbled the moment they were looking down the barrel of serious charges. In the end, nearly all of them were caught. All except one. I'm almost certain it was the driver of that first pickup truck, the one who spoke to me, the one who played it cool and set the whole thing in motion. He got away. And while I hate knowing that, it doesn't take away from what the officers did that night. They didn't just arrest those men. They gave me something far more important: peace of mind. The department even had a unit escort me and my son all the way home, just to make sure nothing else went wrong. I won't go into the legal mess that followed. It dragged on for a while, but justice, in some form, was served. I'll say this: Craigslist wasn't done for me after that. I still used it here and there, but I was never the same. I've been a lot more cautious, a lot more skeptical, and most of all, a hell of a lot more protective of my son. Some scars don't show, but they're there, and they remind you, not every good deal is worth the price.